County courthouse steps, 10 a.m. 4 bidders, 1 tax auction, and Karen screaming, "This is illegal," as I bought her clubhouse for $325,000, 0 cents. 3 years earlier, this same woman tried to fine me $15,000 for my grandfather's dock that's been there since 1953. She claimed my family's Korean War veteran cabin didn't meet her aesthetic standards. Karen Whitmore, HOA president with perfectly manicured nails and the moral compass of a parking meter, had no idea that harassing a union electrician would become her life's biggest mistake. Turns out, while she was busy filing lawsuits and hiring expensive lawyers, I was quietly discovering she'd never actually owned the property she was trying to steal from me. Today, Karen writes me monthly rent checks to use the tennis courts in her own neighborhood. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your family property? Drop your craziest HOA story below, and where are you watching from? Because you're about to see the most satisfying HOA takedown in legal history. Let me paint you the picture of how this whole mess started. My grandfather, Joe, built this 2-acre lakefront cabin with his own hands in 1953 after he came back from Korea. Every cedar shingle, every floorboard, every stone in the fireplace, he placed them himself. The man survived Heartbreak Ridge. Building a cabin was his idea of therapy. The smell of those original cedar shingles still hits you when you walk through the front door, mixed with decades of wood smoke and coffee. I inherited the place after a rough divorce that cost me half of everything else. 25 years of marriage, gone. But Grandpa Joe's cabin, that was mine. Free and clear, with full water rights that predated every fancy house around this lake by 40 years. So there I was, 52 years old, trying to piece my life back together in the same place where I'd learned to tie fishing knots as a kid. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 decades as a union electrician, dealing with power-hungry idiots. And now, I just wanted some peace and quiet. That's when Karen Whitmore showed up. Picture this: white BMW X5, tennis outfit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, and those fake acrylic nails that go tap, tap, tap on her ever-present clipboard. Karen was 48, married to some hedge fund manager, and had moved to the lake 3 years ago with one mission: turning our quiet community into her personal kingdom. The sound of expensive tires crunching on my gravel driveway still makes my blood pressure spike. "Good morning," she chirped, that practiced real estate agent smile plastered across her face. "I'm Karen Whitmore, Sunset Ridge HOA president. This is Steve Patterson, our board member." Steve was her typical yes man, middle management type who'd probably never disagreed with anyone in his life. He stood there holding a stack of papers like they were made of gold. "Beautiful morning," I said, not getting up from my porch chair. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Erin's smile faltered slightly. She wasn't used to people not jumping up to greet her. "Well, actually, we're here on official business. Your dock violates our new aesthetic standards." I looked out at my grandfather's dock, the same sturdy wooden structure that had weathered 47 winters. "That dock's been here since Eisenhower was president, ma'am." "I'm sure you understand we're trying to maintain property values here," Karen continued, her voice getting that condescending edge. "The Homeowners Association has voted to implement new compliance standards. Your dock needs to be upgraded to match our community aesthetic, or," she paused dramatically, "we'll need you to pay a $15,000 compliance fee." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Lady, my property was maintaining values before your subdivision was even a cornfield." She handed me an official-looking violation notice with a 30-day deadline. "I'm sure once you review the HOA guidelines, you'll see this is really quite reasonable." That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who'd never been told no in her entire privileged life, the kind of person who thinks legal letterhead makes her right. After they left, I called my union buddy Mike, who'd been through paralegal training. "Bring me every document you've got," he said. "Something smells fishy about this whole thing." 2 days later, Mike was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of legal papers and a huge grin. "Dan, you're not going to believe this. Your property legally can't be subject to HOA rules. It predates their incorporation by 4 decades. Here's your first knowledge nugget. Always check your deed's recording date versus the HOA's incorporation date. Don't let the older properties often have grandfathered protections that can't be overruled." I wrote Karen a polite but firm letter explaining my legal position. Professional, respectful, but absolutely clear that her 15 grand shakedown wasn't happening. The expensive perfume she'd been wearing still lingered in the air hours after she left, a sharp contrast to the natural pine scent of the lake. I had no idea that letter would start a war. Karen received my letter and apparently didn't take it well. 2 days later, I got a visit from the county code enforcement office. Random inspection, they called it, right? The inspector was a guy named Jerry, decent fellow, probably mid-50s, with the kind of practical handshake that told me he actually knew his job. I welcomed him with coffee and donuts, because that's how you treat working people. "Beautiful place you got here," Jerry said, admiring the craftsmanship as his boots echoed on Grandpa Joe's original hardwood floors. "They don't build them like this anymore." "My grandfather was a perfectionist," I replied. "Korean War vet. Figured if it was worth doing, it was worth doing right." Jerry's eyes lit up. "No kidding? My dad served in Korea too." That's when I pulled out the old photo albums and Jerry spent 20 minutes looking at pictures of Grandpa Joe with his unit. Funny thing about the inspection, my septic system had been checked just 6 months ago as part of the divorce paperwork, passed with flying colors. Jerry confirmed everything was in perfect order. But then he said something interesting. "Dan, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but this complaint came through some unusual channels. Normally we get calls from neighbors or anonymous tips. This one came as a formal request from someone with connections. Here's a knowledge nugget for you. Any communication between an HOA and government officials is public record. Always file Freedom of Information Act requests for copies. It's your right as a taxpayer." So I did exactly that, filed a FOIA request for all correspondence between the Sunset Ridge HOA and code enforcement. Cost me $12 and 3 weeks of waiting. What I got back was pure gold. 17 emails between Karen Whitmore and her brother-in-law at the code enforcement office. 17. The woman had been systematically targeting properties around the lake, using family connections to harass people into compliance. But I wasn't the only target. Jerry had mentioned that 3 other lakefront homeowners got similar random inspections right around the same time, so I started making some calls. That's how I met Betty Morrison. Betty was 78, a retired elementary school teacher with a kind of sharp mind that could spot a cheater from across the classroom. She'd been living on the lake for 15 years, and Karen had been making her life miserable for the past 6 months. "That woman told me my flower garden was a nuisance vegetation violation," Betty said, her weathered hands pointing out where someone had moved her property survey stakes. "My daisies, can you believe it?" Betty invited me over for coffee, and that's when I realized Karen's operation was bigger than I thought. She'd been systematically targeting older residents, people she figured wouldn't fight back, the classic bully playbook. "Well, look at this," Betty said, spreading the FOIA emails across her kitchen table. Her reading glasses slid down her nose as she squinted at the papers. She actually wrote, "These old-timers don't understand progress." The audacity. Pattern was clear. Karen would identify properties she wanted to control, then use her brother-in-law to generate official complaints. Property owners would get scared by the government letterhead and either pay up or move out. But here's the thing about targeting a union electrician and a retired teacher. We both knew how to read contracts, and we'd both dealt with bullies before. Betty had kept every document, every violation notice, every threatening letter. The woman was organized like a military operation. 43 years of teaching middle school, she explained. You learn to document everything. We started holding informal coffee meetings at my place. Word spread quietly through the neighborhood, and pretty soon we had a regular group of Karen's victims sharing stories and comparing notes. Tom Bradley showed up to the third meeting. Retired Coast Guard, knew maritime law like the back of his hand. He took one look at the harassment pattern and got angry. "This is systematic intimidation," Tom said, his military bearings still evident at 65, "and it's illegal as hell." Tom confirmed what I already suspected. My dock rights were ironclad. Not only was my property grandfathered in, but I had riparian rights that predated the entire development. The best part? Karen's own lawyer would have told her this if she'd bothered to do proper research before starting her little shakedown operation. We were building a case, but Karen was just getting started. The smell of fresh coffee and Betty's homemade pie filled my cabin during these planning sessions, a stark contrast to the toxic situation we were dealing with. But there's something powerful about good people coming together against injustice. By the end of that first month, we had documentation, we had witnesses, and we had a plan. Karen Whitmore had picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize. Karen apparently realized I was organizing resistance because she went straight into panic mode. 2 weeks after our coffee group started meeting, I got served with a lawsuit. Right in the middle of my birthday barbecue. I'd invited the neighbors over for burgers and beer. Nothing fancy, just good people enjoying a nice Saturday afternoon by the lake. Betty brought her famous potato salad, Tom showed up with a cooler of ice-cold Budweiser, and even some of the younger families from down the shore came by with their kids. That's when this aggressive process server marched onto my property, shoving legal papers at me while the burgers burned on the grill. Daniel Morrison, you're being served. The lawsuit claimed my dock created a navigation hazard and demanded immediate removal. Karen had hired Pemberton and Associates, one of those expensive downtown law firms that charge $500 0 cents an hour to intimidate people. The smell of charred meat filled the air as I read through the legal gibberish, my guests gathering around with concerned faces. But you know what? Seeing that process server disrupt a family gathering did something to my neighbors. It made this personal for them too. This is harassment, plain and simple, said Maria Santos, one of the newer residents. She was an accountant, quiet most of the time, but when she spoke up, people listened. I've seen this kind of legal bullying before. Maria volunteered to help analyze the HOA's financial records. If she's this aggressive about your dock, I guarantee she's playing fast and loose with the community's money, too. Meanwhile, Mike drove up from Columbus with a box full of legal research. My union buddy had been busy, and he was grinning like he'd found buried treasure. Dan, you're not going to believe what I dug up about your friend Karen, he said, spreading documents across my picnic table. 2 ethics violations on her real estate license in the past 5 years, both for misrepresenting property boundaries. But the real bombshell was what he found about the original developer. The company that built Sunset Ridge had gone bankrupt 3 years ago, but not before racking up $340,000 0 cents in unpaid environmental impact fees. The county had been trying to collect ever since, but nobody knew who was responsible. Here's your second knowledge nugget. Property lien searches through your county recorder's office usually cost $5 0 cents 15 per search, but they can reveal hidden debts and legal problems that affect entire developments. Mike had spent 2 days at the courthouse tracing paper trails and connecting dots. The environmental fees were supposed to be paid before the HOA took over common areas, but the transfer never happened properly. Tom Bradley confirmed what Mike suspected. As a retired Coast Guard officer, Tom knew maritime law inside and out. Your dock rights are federal, he explained. Karen can sue all she wants, but she's got no legal standing. It's like suing someone for having a driveway. We were building a solid defense, but I decided to go on offense too. My union lawyer recommended filing a countersuit for harassment and abuse of process. The key was documentation. I started wearing a small digital recorder, perfectly legal in Ohio, with one-party consent. Always document every interaction with photos, recordings where legal, and written summaries with timestamps. That July 4th, the whole neighborhood had a block party down by the lake. Kids running around with sparklers, adults grilling hot dogs, the kind of community gathering that makes small-town America special. Karen showed up drunk. Not tipsy, drunk. She'd apparently been celebrating at the country club before stumbling over to crash our party. Her heel caught in the grass and she stumbled slightly, wine sloshing from her plastic cup. I don't care what some old hillbilly thinks he owns, she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. This is my lake now. My digital recorder caught every slurred word. The conversation stopped. Kids quit running around. Even the teenagers looked uncomfortable. You could hear crickets chirping in the sudden silence. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "maybe you should head home and sleep this off." "Don't you tell me what to do," Karen shrieked. "I'm going to destroy you. I'll take everything you have." Betty stepped forward, all 78 years and 5'2" of her. "Young lady, you're embarrassing yourself and this community." Aaron tried to argue with Betty, but you don't win fights with retired teachers. Betty had handled drunk parents at school board meetings before. Steve Patterson, Karen's usual yes man, finally found some backbone. He gently took Karen's arm and guided her toward the parking area. "Come on, Karen, let's get you home." But the damage was done. Every neighbor at that party had witnessed Karen's meltdown, and word spread fast. The woman who claimed to represent community values had just shown everyone exactly what kind of person she really was. My recorder had captured it all, and suddenly Karen's lawsuit looked a lot weaker. Karen's lawsuit wasn't working, so she decided to get dirty, really dirty. A week after her drunken meltdown, I got another unexpected visitor. This time from the EPA. Someone had filed an anonymous tip claiming my old cabin was polluting the lake with illegal sewage discharge. The EPA inspector showed up the same day my lawyer filed our countersuit. Coincidence? Yeah, right. But here's the thing about being a union electrician for 30 years. You learn to anticipate problems before they happen. I'd already had independent water testing done around my property just in case someone tried to pull exactly this kind of stunt. The EPA inspector was Sandra Kim, a professional who actually knew her job. She spent 3 hours taking water samples around my dock, testing my septic system and examining every inch of my shoreline. Mr. Morrison, she said, watching the clear lake water catch the morning sunlight in her testing vials, I've got to tell you, these are some of the cleanest water samples I've seen on this entire lake. Here's your third knowledge nugget. Private environmental testing costs $200, 0 cents, but can expose false accusations and reveal real pollution problems. Always get independent verification before government agencies get involved. But Sandra's testing revealed something Karen probably didn't expect. The real pollution problem wasn't coming from my 70-year-old cabin. It was coming from Sunset Ridge's over-fertilized lawns and faulty storm water system. Phosphate levels near the new development were 300% above safe limits. All that chemical lawn treatment was running straight into the lake every time it rained. This is a serious environmental violation, Sandra explained, showing me the test results. Someone's going to be looking at major fines. Tom Bradley had noticed the same thing from his boat. Been seeing unusual algae blooms near those storm drains all summer, he'd told me. Water's turning green every time we get a heavy rain. Meanwhile, Maria Santos was working her accounting magic on the HOA's financial records. What she found was stunning. Dan, look at this, Maria said, spreading budget printouts across my kitchen table. Her reading glasses reflected the afternoon light streaming through my windows. $89,000 in landscaping fees paid to Karen's husband's company over the past 2 years. The paper trail was clear. Karen had been voting herself lucrative contracts, raising association dues, and eliminating any financial transparency. The woman was running the HOA like her personal piggy bank. Betty Morrison had been busy too. As a retired teacher, she knew how to research like a detective. I went through 3 years of HOA meeting minutes, she announced at our next coffee gathering. Karen never properly called elections. She's been illegally serving as president this entire time. The copy machine at the library had been working overtime, humming late into the evening as we assembled our evidence. Stack after stack of documents, all showing the same pattern of corruption and abuse. That's when the legal momentum really shifted in our favor. Karen's expensive lawyer, apparently not as competent as his billing rate suggested, made a series of procedural errors in court. My union attorney called me with barely contained excitement. Dan, she just handed us summary judgment on a silver platter. Her lawyer filed the wrong motions and missed 2 critical deadlines. But the real blow came when the local newspaper picked up our story. HOA president accused of environmental cover-up ran as the front page headline in the Lake County Tribune. The reporter, Jessica Martinez, was an investigative journalist who smelled a bigger story brewing. She'd done her homework, discovering that Karen's real estate license was under review again for ethical violations. Karen refused all interviews, hiding behind an expensive PR consultant who clearly had his work cut out for him. Social media exploded with the Sunset Ridge Scandal hashtag. Property owners started sharing their own Karen horror stories, and the comments section became a therapy session for HOA abuse victims. The crisp legal documents felt solid and official in my calloused hands as our case gained momentum. After 30 years of working with my hands, there was something satisfying about holding papers that represented justice finally being served. Karen's harassment lawsuit was dismissed when the judge reviewed the EPA findings. Turns out it's hard to claim someone's property is an environmental hazard when government testing proves it's cleaner than everything around it. But my countersuit against Karen personally, that was just getting started. She picked the wrong union electrician to mess with, my lawyer told me over the phone. We've got her on harassment, abusive process, and now potentially fraud. The smell of victory was in the air, mixing with the clean scent of lake water that Sandra's tests had proven was pristine around my property. Karen Whitmore had declared war on the wrong neighbor. Maria Santos made a discovery that changed everything. She was helping me organize documents for our legal case, her accounting mind naturally drawn to inconsistencies in the HOA paperwork. That's when she found something that made her gasp so sharply it echoed through my cabin. "Dan," she said, papers rustling urgently in her hands, "you need to see this right now." What she'd found was a massive irregularity in the HOA's original incorporation papers. The lake access easement, the clubhouse, the tennis courts, the beach, none of it had ever been properly transferred to the association. "Look at these dates," Maria explained, her finger tracing the timeline. "The developer went bankrupt before completing the asset transfer to the HOA. Legally, the Sunset Ridge Association doesn't actually own what they think they own." I stared at the documents, not quite believing what I was seeing. So who does own it? Maria's research had uncovered the shocking truth. The county owned all the common areas. The lake access, clubhouse, beach, everything Karen thought was hers to control. The developer's bankruptcy had left these properties in legal limbo, and the county had been trying to contact a responsible party for 3 years of unpaid property taxes. Here's a knowledge nugget that could change your life. Always verify that HOAs actually own what they claim to control. Incorporation papers don't guarantee asset ownership, especially with bankrupt developers. Tom Bradley confirmed Maria's findings using his Coast Guard contacts who understood maritime property law. The clubhouse and beach were never legally deeded to the HOA, he explained. They've been operating under false pretenses this whole time. Betty Morrison, bless her thorough teacher's heart, had found the original developer bankruptcy filings at the courthouse. The musty smell of old records filled that basement archive room. Fluorescent lights humming overhead as she photographed page after page of yellow documents that crackled when she unfolded them. Mike helped me research the county's tax lien auction procedures. Tax lien auctions let you acquire property for unpaid taxes. They're usually held quarterly by the county treasurer's office. The math was simple and beautiful. 3 years of unpaid property taxes on the common areas totaled $127,000, 0 cents. My inheritance plus the divorce settlement had left me with $340,000, 0 cents, in available funds. I could buy Karen's entire kingdom out from under her. The power dynamic had completely flipped. Instead of fighting Karen's bogus lawsuit, I could simply purchase the properties she thought she controlled. The irony was perfect. The woman trying to steal my grandfather's cabin was about to lose everything she'd been illegally managing. But here's where my union values kicked in. I could have quietly bought everything at auction and surprised Karen later, but that felt too much like the kind of dirty trick she would pull. Instead, I decided to give the community a chance to know what was happening. I planned to attend the next HOA meeting with our findings and offer a transparent solution. Of course, Karen was completely oblivious to the legal catastrophe heading her way. She was still focused on her failing harassment lawsuit, still making threats, still digging herself deeper into a hole that was about to swallow her whole. She left another angry voicemail on my phone. "Drop your ridiculous countersuit, or I'll make sure you lose everything." I played that message for Maria and Betty and we all started laughing. Karen was threatening to take everything from a man who was about to own her clubhouse. The county tax auction was scheduled for 3 weeks away. I had certified funds ready, legal representation lined up, and a plan that would turn Karen's little dictatorship into a cautionary tale about the dangers of abusing power. Betty was already planning what she'd say when Karen found out the truth. "I taught middle school for 43 years, she told me with a wicked grin. "I know exactly how to handle bullies." Maria was calculating the total cost. $127, 0 cents, K in back taxes plus fees and legal costs, roughly $150, 0 cents K. Total investment to acquire a property worth over $2 million, 0 cents. The best part, everything Karen had done to me was about to become perfectly legal when I did it to her. My cabin became the unofficial headquarters for what Betty dubbed Operation Lake Justice. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with old wood as papers covered every surface of my dining table. We had wall maps showing all the properties, legal timelines, and auction deadlines marked in red ink. The team had grown into a well-oiled machine. Mike handled legal research and auction procedures. Betty coordinated our neighborhood communication network with the efficiency of a retired teacher who'd managed parent volunteers for decades. Tom provided maritime law expertise and historical documentation. Maria managed our financial analysis and tax calculations. Then we got a major addition to our crew. Jennifer Kim, an environmental lawyer who'd heard about our EPA findings. She offered to work pro bono on the environmental violations case. What Karen's done here goes way beyond HOA harassment, Jennifer explained during our strategy session. Using family connections to file false government complaints is abuse of process. The environmental cover-up could be criminal fraud. We developed a three-front attack strategy. On the legal front, Jennifer filed formal environmental complaints against the Sunset Ridge development with both state and federal agencies. My countersuit against Karen personally was proceeding beautifully. When HOA officials exceed their authority for personal gain, you can sue them individually, which pierces their corporate protection. The financial front was where things got really interesting. I registered for the county tax auction and got my certified funds ready. The bank's counting machine whirred late into the evening as I arranged cashier's checks. Maria calculated our total acquisition cost, $127.00. K in back taxes, $15.00 K in fees, $8.00 K in legal costs, roughly $150.00 K to buy a $2,300,000 property. Here's another knowledge nugget. Tax lien certificates in Ohio earn 18% annual interest if the property isn't redeemed by the original owner. Betty organized the community front like a military campaign. Her lake preservation committee included affected neighbors, and she'd started a social media campaign documenting Karen's abuses. The local TV news station was sniffing around after our environmental story went viral. The technical preparation was thorough. Jennifer's environmental consultant waded through the muck near those storm drains, documenting pollution sources while the smell of algae and chemical runoff made everyone gag. An independent property surveyor confirmed what we already knew. All the boundary disputes favored my position. One more knowledge nugget. Independent surveys cost $800,1200 but often reveal HOA boundary overreach that you can use in court. Tom Bradley was documenting 47 years of my family's lake stewardship with old photographs and Coast Guard navigation records. The historical evidence was overwhelming. My grandfather's property had been good for this lake long before Karen's subdivision existed. But the most important part of our strategy was psychological. I continued my normal cabin routine, waving politely when Karen drove by in her BMW. The woman had no idea what was coming, and her frustration was driving her to make bigger and bigger mistakes. Let her think she's winning while we build the trap, I told Mike during one of our late-night planning sessions. The auction mechanics were straightforward. Sealed bid process, 10% deposit required, 30-day closing period. If I won, I'd get immediate ownership of all structures and common areas. Every contract the HOA had signed would become mine to enforce or void as I saw fit. Final takeaway: buying tax-delinquent HOA property gives you control over all association assets and existing contracts. We had a backup plan too. If the auction strategy somehow failed, our countersuit case was strong enough to win $200.00 K plus in damages. Jennifer's environmental case could force expensive remediation on Sunset Ridge. We documented enough harassment for a solid homeowner's insurance claim. The beauty of our approach was that Karen had unknowingly created all the evidence we needed. Every threatening letter, every illegal government complaint, every abuse of HOA authority. She'd handed us a perfect case on a silver platter. 3 weeks before the auction, I started wearing my small digital recorder everywhere. Legal in Ohio, and Karen was getting more erratic by the day. I had a feeling she was going to do something spectacularly stupid before this was over. Betty was already planning the victory party. 43 years of teaching middle school, she told me, and I never met a bully who didn't eventually hang themselves with their own rope. Maria had the financial projections ready. Even if we paid full market price for the property, we'd control prime lakefront real estate worth millions. At auction prices, it was the deal of a lifetime. Tom was practicing his speech for when Karen found out the truth. Military precision, he called it. The stage was set. Karen Whitmore thought she was playing chess while we'd been setting up a completely different game. In 2 weeks, the Queen was going to discover she'd been in checkmate all along. Karen was getting desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. It was 2 a.m. when my security camera, Tom Bradley's suggestion after all the harassment, caught her sneaking around my dock with a pair of bolt cutters. The woman was actually trying to sabotage my property. The infrared footage was crystal clear. Karen, dressed in dark clothes like some suburban ninja, cutting through the ropes that secured my dock to the shore. You could hear the splash as my grandfather's dock bumped against the rocks, rope fibers snapping in the night air. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save your property. Security cameras on your own land are legal everywhere. Invest in night vision capability if you're dealing with unstable neighbors. I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I filed a police report the next morning, handing over the digital evidence to Deputy Johnson, whose pen scratched methodically across the incident report as he documented Karen's criminal mischief. "This is escalating beyond civil disputes," Deputy Johnson warned me. "People this unhinged can be dangerous. Keep your doors locked." Video went viral on local Facebook groups within hours. The comments section exploded with outrage from neighbors who couldn't believe their HOA president was creeping around cutting dock lines at 2 a.m. "I can't believe we elected this woman to represent us," wrote one neighbor. Even Karen's few remaining supporters started backing away. Whispered conversations followed her everywhere. At the grocery store, the gas station, the country club. You could see people's eyes tracking her movements, wondering what she'd do next. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake yet. She approached me privately at the marina, probably thinking she was being clever. Of course, I was wearing my digital recorder, and I captured every word of her attempted bribery. "Look, Dan," she said, glancing around nervously, "maybe we can work something out. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 to just move away and drop all this legal nonsense." Look, I kept my voice calm and level. "Ma'am, are you trying to buy me off?" "I'm trying to be reasonable here," Karen continued, her desperation obvious. "We both know you don't really belong here with people like us. Take the money, find a nice little place somewhere else, and we can all move on." "Ma'am, I'm going to pretend you didn't just say what I think you said." The recording was pure gold. Bribery, intimidation, and what sounded suspiciously like discrimination, all captured in high-definition audio. Bribery and intimidation attempts are federal crimes when they involve property disputes. Always document these conversations legally. Jennifer Kim, our environmental lawyer, nearly jumped out of her chair when I played her the recording. "Dan, this recording just made your harassment case a slam dunk." She's looking at criminal charges now. The legal momentum was building like an avalanche. Jennifer's environmental case had attracted EPA attention, and now the state environmental agency was launching a full investigation into Sunset Ridge's construction permits. Meanwhile, the local news coverage was getting serious attention. Reporter Jessica Martinez from Channel 7 had been digging deeper into the story, following the money trail between Karen's real estate business and various county officials. Karen refused all interview requests, hiding behind an expensive PR consultant who was clearly earning his fee. But refusing to talk just made her look more guilty. The media attention brought community support pouring in. Our Save Lake Sunset fundraiser raised $12,000 0 cents for legal costs, with neighbors contributing everything from cash to homemade pies. The smell of grilled corn at the fundraiser barbecue mixed with the laughter of kids playing while adults discussed how to protect their community. Betty organized a letter-writing campaign to county commissioners, and Tom documented nearly half a century of my family's responsible lake stewardship with historical photographs and navigation records. Karen's final, desperate legal move was trying to get a restraining order against me, claiming I was threatening and intimidating. The judge took about 30 seconds to deny the request for lack of evidence. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed through the courtroom as the judge dismissed Karen's petition. "Ma'am, you'll need to find new representation," the court clerk told her, because her expensive lawyer had just withdrawn from the case, citing unpaid bills and ethical concerns. Karen was now representing herself, always a bad sign in complex legal disputes. The tax auction was 10 days away. Karen still had no idea what was coming, too focused on her crumbling harassment campaign to notice the real threat approaching. My team was ready, documentation complete, funds certified, legal representation secured. We transformed from victims into a coordinated force that Karen's chaotic approach couldn't handle. The best part? Every crime she committed, every threat she made, every illegal move she attempted just strengthened our position and weakened hers. Karen's final gambit was hiring a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. What she didn't know was that the PI turned out to be Tom Bradley's old Coast Guard buddy, who reported back to us immediately. "She's paying me $500 a day to find something criminal in your background," the investigator told Tom over beers. Lady's desperate enough to believe her own conspiracy theories. So Karen was getting real-time intelligence on her own investigation. Intelligence that showed I was exactly who I claimed to be. No criminal record, no financial improprieties, just a divorced union electrician trying to enjoy his inheritance in peace. When the PI's report came back clean, Karen went completely off the rails. Anonymous flyers started appearing in mailboxes around the lake, claiming I was a dangerous veteran with PTSD who threatens community safety. The cheap paper fluttered from mailboxes in the morning breeze like some demented ticker tape parade. The smear campaign backfired spectacularly when neighbors realized Karen had gotten basic facts wrong. I'd never served in the military. That was my grandfather, and everybody knew it. Betty Morrison, bless her detective skills, traced the printing to Karen's real estate office through watermark analysis. 43 years of catching middle school cheaters, she explained with satisfaction. You learn to spot amateur document forgery. Meanwhile, I was making final preparations for the tax auction in complete secrecy. Mike handled all paperwork through attorney channels, using legal privilege to keep our strategy confidential. The sound of documents being notarized and official seals pressing into paper had become a regular soundtrack at my cabin. Here's your knowledge nugget. Use attorneys for sensitive document filings. It creates attorney-client privilege protection that keeps your strategy confidential. 10 days before the auction, the EPA dropped a bombshell. Their testing confirmed major violations in Sunset Ridge's stormwater management system, with a proposed $2,300,000 0 cents fine for the original developer, who'd been bankrupt for 3 years. Environmental liabilities transfer with property ownership, meaning individual homeowners were now potentially liable for the mess. Always check for environmental contamination issues when buying property. Liability follows ownership. Erin called an emergency HOA meeting when the EPA news broke. Her hands shook as she tried to read a prepared statement to angry homeowners who just learned their property values had crashed overnight. "You told us this development was premium quality," shouted one neighbor, fury evident in every word. The HOA board members resigned en masse that night. Steve Patterson, Karen's longtime yes man, publicly apologized to me in front of the entire community. "Dan, I'm sorry we put you through this harassment. Karen told us you were the problem." Homeowners voted no confidence and demanded Karen's resignation. She refused, claiming the meeting was illegally constituted and that she remained the legitimate president. Nobody was buying it anymore. Through all this chaos, I maintained my normal routine, tended my garden, fixed things around the cabin, waved politely at stressed neighbors driving past. Fresh tomatoes were ripening on the vine, a peaceful contrast to the suburban warfare happening next door. "I just want to enjoy my grandfather's cabin and keep the lake clean," I told Jessica Martinez when she interviewed me for the evening news. My calm demeanor made Karen's hysteria look even more unhinged. The final setup was beautiful in its simplicity. The county had published the auction notice in the legal section of the newspaper. You know, that section Karen never bothered reading because she was too busy creating drama. My team was ready with all documentation, certified funds, and legal representation, but somehow word had leaked about the upcoming auction, and 3 other bidders registered at the last minute. That night, I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and made final preparations. The manila envelope containing my certified cashier's check sat on my kitchen counter, representing 3 years of careful planning and Karen's complete blindness to the real threat. Tom Bradley stopped by for coffee before the big day. 40 years of Coast Guard service, he said, and I've never seen someone sail straight into an iceberg they could have avoided with basic navigation. Betty called to wish me luck. "Remember, sweetie, bullies only win when good people don't fight back. You fought back." Maria had run the numbers one final time. Even if bidding got competitive, we were acquiring millions in lakefront property for a fraction of its value. The irony was perfect. Karen had spent months trying to steal my grandfather's modest cabin, never realizing she was about to lose a multi-million-dollar clubhouse to the same man. My alarm clock was set, the trap was ready. Karen Whitmore was about to discover that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything. Auction day. County courthouse steps, 10 a.m. sharp. Morning dew clung to the courthouse lawn as county officials set up their folding table and paperwork. My footsteps echoed on the marble steps as I arrived with Mike, my certified check sealed in a manila envelope that represented 3 years of careful planning. I dressed simply, jeans, work boots, flannel shirt, just another working guy conducting business, nothing flashy or attention-grabbing. That's when I saw Karen's BMW screech into the parking lot. She jumped out, still in her tennis outfit, and sprinted toward the courthouse. The look on her face when she spotted me standing with the other bidders was priceless. Pure shock mixed with dawning horror. "This is illegal!" Karen screamed loud enough to wake the dead. "You can't sell our property!" The county clerk, a patient woman in her 60s who'd probably seen every kind of drama, calmly explained the law while legal documents fluttered in Karen's shaking hands. "Ma'am, unpaid property taxes create a lien. The lien holders have the right to auction for recovery. This is standard procedure." 4 registered bidders stood ready. Me, an anonymous LLC that I suspected was Karen's last-ditch attempt using her husband's money, a local property developer, and surprisingly an environmental conservation group. The auctioneer, a professional who'd been running these sales for 20 years, called the proceedings to order. His rapid-fire voice carried across the courthouse lawn as a small crowd gathered to watch. "We're here for the tax lien auction of properties commonly known as Sunset Ridge Common Areas, including clubhouse, beach access, tennis courts, and recreational facilities. Bidding starts at $127,000, 0 cents to cover outstanding tax obligations." Karen's anonymous LLC bid immediately. The property developer jumped in. The environmental group raised their paddle. The crowd murmured as bidding quickly escalated past $200,000, 0 cents. Then $250,000, 0 cents. Jessica Martinez and her news crew were filming everything, cameras capturing the drama as Karen paced frantically behind the bidders. At $280,000, 0 cents, only Karen's LLC and I remained active. The developer had dropped out. The conservation group was saving their resources. That's when I made my final move. $325,000, I called out clearly. The auctioneer's rapid-fire cadence slowed. "I have $325,000, 0 cents, from bidder number 1. Do I hear $330,000, 0 cents? Silence. Karen's husband frantically whispered in her ear, probably explaining they'd reached their limit. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer's gavel hung in the air. "Sold to bidder number 1. The sharp crack of the gavel striking the wooden block echoed across the courthouse steps with beautiful finality. Karen let out a wail that probably scared birds 3 counties over. She collapsed into her husband's arms while cameras rolled, capturing every moment of her complete breakdown. Jessica Martinez thrust her microphone toward me immediately. "Mr. Morrison, how do you feel about winning this auction?" I looked directly into the camera, calm as a lake on a windless morning. "Well, I just bought my neighbor's clubhouse. Guess that makes them my tenants now." That's when Karen completely lost it. She broke free from her husband and charged straight at me, screaming incoherently. 2 county deputies had to restrain her while she flailed and shouted threats that probably violated several laws. Camera shutters clicked rapidly, news van generators hummed in the background, and social media was already exploding with Sunset Ridge auction videos. The legal aftermath was swift and decisive. As the new owner of all common areas, I controlled the clubhouse, beach access, tennis courts, and playground. Every contract the HOA had signed was now mine to enforce or void. Here's your final knowledge nugget. Tax lien auction winners get clear title that's superior to all other claims, including existing mortgages. The sheriff served Karen with an eviction notice right there on the courthouse steps. "Ma'am, you're currently behind on association dues owed to the new property owner. You have 30 days to pay or vacate." I announced my new rental rate for Karen's access to the facilities, $15,000, 0 cents per month. The same amount she'd tried to extort from me for my grandfather's perfectly legal dock. The crowd that had gathered began cheering. Neighbors who'd witnessed months of Karen's harassment were applauding spontaneously. Betty Morrison had tears in her eyes. Tom Bradley gave me a crisp military salute. She picked the wrong union electrician to mess with, my lawyer told the reporters, grinning from ear to ear. Karen's harassment lawsuit was automatically dismissed. She no longer had legal standing to sue me over property I now controlled. My countersuit against her personally was proceeding full steam ahead. The power reversal was complete. The woman who'd tried to steal my family's cabin was now facing eviction from her own community. 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. I kept the clubhouse open for all residents at reasonable rates. $50.00 a month for families, $25.00 for seniors. The smell of fresh paint filled the air as we renovated, and the sound of kids laughing at the playground returned for the first time in years. Betty Morrison won the legitimate HOA election in a landslide, becoming president with 89% of the vote. Her first act was implementing financial transparency that Karen had eliminated. Her second was establishing environmental restoration as the community's top priority. Karen's fate was swift and decisive. She lost her real estate license permanently after the state board reviewed our evidence of fraud and harassment. Criminal charges were filed for the bribery attempt and environmental cover-up. She was forced to sell her house to pay legal bills and move to a small apartment across town. I didn't take pleasure in anyone's downfall, but actions have consequences. The environmental victory became our biggest success story. The EPA approved my lake restoration plan, and we secured a $50,000 0-cents federal grant for wetland restoration. New native plants were taking root along the shoreline, their green shoots a sign of the lake's recovery. Water quality improved 40% in the first year. The algae blooms disappeared, fish populations rebounded. Tom Bradley reported seeing osprey nesting for the first time in a decade. The community healing happened faster than anyone expected. Monthly lake cleanup events drew 50-plus volunteers, with me providing free barbecue for everyone who helped. The sound of laughter and music from these gatherings replaced the tension that had poisoned our neighborhood. Property values recovered completely as the environmental issues were resolved and the community drama ended. Real estate agents started advertising Lake Sunset as a premier destination again. My personal life took an unexpected turn too. Maria Santos and I started dating, our relationship built on shared values and mutual respect. She moved into the cabin last month, bringing her homemade salsa recipes to our community dinners. The Grandpa Joe Memorial Scholarship launched with $25,000 0-cents from my countersuit settlement. Turning personal victory into community benefit creates lasting positive change that outlasts any individual conflict. We award $2,500 0-cents annually to local students entering trade schools. Our annual Lake Stewardship Day now brings 200-plus volunteers from across the county. I teach dock building workshops for kids, passing on skills my grandfather taught me. Betty wrote a book titled Fighting HOA Bullies, a Senior's Guide that became a local bestseller. The practical lessons we learned spread far beyond our community. My YouTube channel, Know Your Property Rights, has 50,000 subscribers, helping other homeowners fight similar battles. The most popular video is How to Research HOA Authority, with over 300,000 views. Betty's book signing events turn into informal support groups for HOA harassment victims. Tom Bradley consults on maritime property rights cases across Ohio. Maria started a side business helping homeowners analyze suspicious HOA finances. 3 other HOA disputes in our county were resolved using our playbook: research, documentation, community organizing, and strategic legal action. The ultimate irony? Karen eventually applied for a job at Bradley's hardware store downtown. Tom's friend, who owns the place, asked my opinion before hiring her. "Give her a chance," I told him. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to rebuild their life." She's been working there 6 months now, quietly and professionally. We nod politely when we see each other in town. No drama, no conflict, just 2 people who've moved on from an unfortunate situation. Last month, the county commissioners asked me to run for their board, focusing on property rights protection and environmental stewardship. Maria thinks it's a great idea. Betty's already volunteering to manage my campaign. From victim to community leader in 2 years. Not bad for a divorced electrician who just wanted to enjoy his grandfather's cabin in peace. The final scene always brings me back to where this started. Sitting on my dock at sunset, watching loons call across clean water, with my grandfather's Korean War flag flying proudly above the cabin he built with his own hands. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something better than what they tried to destroy. What's your worst HOA nightmare? Share your story in the comments, the craziest ones might become our next video, and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're investigating 3 more HOA corruption cases that'll blow your mind. Next week, the HOA that tried to ban vegetable gardens until they discovered the homeowner was a commercial farmer with $2 million 0 cents in crop insurance. You won't believe what happened when harvest season arrived.